Hello everyone, welcome to learning class. Today we are gonna do an academic reading passage of IELTS, and the title of the passage is The Battle of Toten. So let's see what type of questions are there in this passage. So first five questions, they are like summary, and we have to choose one word or a number. Okay, and then questions 6 to 9 are true false not given, and then 10 to 13 are MCQs. 10, 11, 12, and 13. So there are total 13 number of questions in this passage. So let's start without wasting it any time. Okay, so firstly let's see the first question. So in this is summary, and we have to write one word or a number, and it states that the battlefield at Toten in northern England has only recently been surveyed and excavated. Okay, archaeologists are now looking at medieval dash in a new way. So archaeologists are now, yeah, that means at present, looking, okay, at medieval what, and they are looking at medieval something in a new way. So let's find out where it's written. See, early analysis of the remains has led to a reassessment of medieval warfare. So I guess this is the location of our first answer, because and they are doing the analysis of remains. Who are doing? Archaeologists are doing, and this has led to a reassessment. That means they are looking into something in a new way. Reassessment of medieval warfare. So what is the thing that they are looking in a new way? It's warfare. So definitely our answers is gonna be warfare, because medieval is given in the question. So let's write it down. Warfare. Okay. And then, although a major battle took place at Toten, this is not popular knowledge for English people, as the battle is not studied at dash. So where is the battle not studied? Okay, this we have to tell. So let's search for the second answer. Okay. Toten, a village in the north of England between York and Leeds, is unknown to many English people. So yes, they were talking about the unknowingness of Toten for English people. History taught at school largely ignores the mid 15th century. Okay, so that means, like, in school they are not taught about mid 15th century, they just ignore. And since the Battle of Toten took place in 1461, definitely it's mid 15th century, so definitely they have ignored the Battle of Toten at school. Students are not uh, told about the Battle of Toten at school, so they do not study. Okay, so definitely this is the location. History taught at school ignores the mid 15th century. So definitely our answer, in the answer we have to write that where Battle of Toten is not studied. So definitely our answer is gonna be school, because at school students are not told about the Battle of Toten. This is not popular knowledge for English people, as the battle is not studied at school. Okay, moving on to the next question. In 1996, soldiers' skeletons were found under a building near Toten. So near Toten, a building was there, and under that building, soldiers' skeletons were found. Dash of these had all their bones. So like in this, we have to tell a number. Like from those skeletons, how many had all their bones? Like they had all their bones in their body. How many of skeletons? So let's find it out. Okay. In 1996, yes, they were talking about 1996, a building nearby called Toten Hall was being renovated when laborers unearthed skeletons in its grounds. So they found out skeletons in its grounds and beneath its floor, that is, under the building. 28 of these were complete, another 20 or so were partial. So that means 28 of these, what? 28 of skeletons, of these skeletons were complete. That means in a way that they had all their bones and another 20 or so were partial. That means another 20 or so did not have all their bones. So definitely our answer is gonna be 28. So this is the answer of the third question, because they had all their bones. 28 of skeletons had all their bones. 28. Okay, next question. This meant archaeologists could accurately determine how the soldiers had died. Okay, this was a way in which they could figure out that how the soldiers had died. The archaeologists were very surprised by the dash. So what was the thing with which the archaeologists were surprised? And it was like an adjective to means of death, like how they died. So here would definitely come an adjective, because the sentence is the archaeologists were very surprised by the dash means of death, like how they died, means of death. Okay, so let's see what kind of means, in which kind of means they died, the soldiers. So, okay, what shocked, that means what surprised archaeologists were the violent way in which the men had met their deaths. So, definitely, this was the way, this was the means of their death in which the men had met their deaths. So, in a violent way, they died. So, this was the thing that surprised the archaeologists, that they were shocked. Okay, so definitely, let's look at this. What shocked archaeologists were the violent way in which the men had met their death. So definitely our answer is gonna be violent, because this was the way in which they died, and definitely it's an adjective. Violent. And the uncaring method of dash. So this was the second thing that the archaeologists were surprised with, and it was the uncaring method of dash. So uncaring method of what? This we have to find out. Yeah, here's also an and. That means they were also surprised with the callous manner of their burial. So this is our location. Callous manner. What does the word callous means? It means like unfeeling or without emotions, unemotional manner of their burial. So in very callous manner, the soldiers that had died were buried. So definitely our answer is gonna be burial, because for callous they have given the word uncaring, like unemotional, unfeeling, it's the same. So definitely our answer's gonna be burial, because it was the uncaring या फिर callous method of burial. So our first five answers we have find out, and now moving on to the next 6 to 9 questions. So these are like true if the statement agrees with the information, false if the statement contradicts with the information, and not given if there is no information on this. So let's see the first true false not given, and it is sixth question. The Battle of Toten was part of a war. So it was like a part of a war between two families seeking control over England. So the Battle of Toten was a part of a war between two families seeking control over England. Let's find out whether this information is true or false, or whether it's not given. Yes. So what was the Battle of Toten? So what was it about? Okay, it was one clash of many. So that means it means that it was like a part of a war, like like it was written in the question. So what was the Battle of Toten? It was one clash of many, which means it was a part of a war between two powerful families, like it was written. And the powerful families were the Lancastrians and the Yorkists. Okay, these are the names of the powerful families who each wanted their king to rule England. So they wanted that their king should rule England in a way that they wanted to control England. So definitely all the information that was written in the sixth question is true. So our answer is gonna be true. Okay, moving on to the next question. Soldiers who fought at Toten were better trained than in the past. Okay, the soldiers who fought in the Battle of Toten were better trained than they were in the past. So let's see. Yes, here comes. Prior to Toten. So they are talking about the past, when before the Battle of Toten. Okay, military encounters in England. Military encounters in England had been small scale. The battles were fought with hundreds or at most a few thousand men. So there were not many men in the battles, and no army was professional, and the army was also unprofessional. They were not particularly well trained for the battle. In so-called peacetime, private armies consisted of men ranging in age from 15 to 50, whose levels of fitness were variable and whose training and equipment were poor. So definitely they are telling that uh, the past soldiers were not trained. Their training was poor. Okay, so they are talking that the past soldiers were not trained. Okay, this meant that when fighting did erupt, when fighting began, it seldom lasted long. So that means it perhaps just a few days. It lasted for just a few days, nor were many men killed. uh, most of the men came alive after the battle. In fact, there is evidence that more men died from their wounds or other illnesses after combat. So, in the battle, they did not die. They mostly died due to the wounds of the battle, that also after the battle, and or the illnesses that were caused after the battle. Toten, it seems different. So, or other illnesses after combat. Here, up to here, they are talking about the wars that were prior to Toten, that happened when the Battle of Toten did not occur. So now they are talking about the Toten battle. Toten, it seems, was different. So the Battle of Toten was different. For here was a battle in which both sides assembled large armies. So comparatively, prior to Toten, the armies were very small, but in the Battle of Toten, there was a large armies on the both sides, and there were terrible casualties in the field. And also, prior to Toten, men were not killed in majority. ठीक है? And but in the Battle of Toten, terrible casualties occurred in the field. That means men died in the field during the battle. So, in the Battle of Toten, nothing is given about the training of the soldiers. The only two things that they are telling is that there were large armies and there were terrible casualties. That is the opposite of the battles which were prior to Toten, because the armies were small scale, small, like only 1,000 men, and they did not die in the battle. They died after combat. Okay, so these two things are totally opposite. And prior to Toten battles, they told that the training was poor, but there was no mention of training in the Toten battle. Like, were the soldiers that participated in the Battle of Toten were trained or not? This is not given. So how can we compare uh, the training of the soldiers between the Battle of Toten and the battles that happened before Toten, when no information is given of the training of the soldiers in the Battle of Toten? So definitely our answer is gonna be not given, because it's not given. Comparison is not given. That whether the soldiers who fought at Toten, they were better trained, or those were better trained, uh, those participated in the past battles. So definitely our answer is gonna be not given. Eighth question, 10% of all soldiers in England. So the soldiers in England, all soldiers in England, 10% of those died at Toten. Okay, so from all the soldiers in England, 10% died in the Battle of Toten. Let's see whether it's true, false, or not given. Here it's written, one estimate of the dead is 28,000 out of the 75,000 soldiers who took part. Okay, 75,000 soldiers took part in the Battle of Toten, and out of them 28,000 died. These 75,000 represent 10% of all fighting age men in England at that time. So this is our location. So understand what I'm trying to say is that 75,000 soldiers participated in the Battle of Toten, and out of them, only 28,000 died. And those 75,000 were 10% of all fighting age men in England at that time. That means how many soldiers were at present at that time in England? Uh, from 10% of those were 75,000. It means like total soldiers in England at that time were 75,000 and one more zero. Okay, so it would be like 7,50,000 soldiers were in England at that time, and 10% of 7,50,000 soldiers participated, and which was 75,000 soldiers who took part, they participated. And what was the count of the soldiers those died in the battle? 28,000. So clearly 28,000 is not the 10% of all the soldiers in England. 75,000 is the 10% of all the soldiers in England. According to the question, 10% of the all soldiers in England died. ठीक है? But we know that 75,000 soldiers did not die. Only 28,000 die, which is not, 28,000 is not the 10% of all fighting age men in England. So definitely our answer is gonna be false because it clearly contradicts with the statement. So the answer is false. Next question. Guns killed many soldiers at Toten. So many of the soldiers were killed by guns in the Battle of Toten. Let's see how much of this statement is correct. Here it is written, there are no obvious deaths from guns and it is hard to say how they were used. Okay, so clearly this is the location that we can get for the ninth question. There are no obvious deaths from guns. That means guns killed like nothing. Guns killed no soldiers during the battle, which totally contradicts with the statement because the statement says most of the soldiers were killed by guns in the Battle of Toten, but here they are saying that there are no obvious deaths from guns. So definitely it just clearly contradicts the statement. Our answer is gonna be false. Now let's move on to the questions 10 to 13. These are the MCQ type questions. 10th question is, most Lancastrians were killed. Okay, so they are talking about most Lancastrians were killed, like where they were killed, at Towton Hall, in prison, or how they were killed fleeing the Yorkists, fighting in lines on the battlefield. Okay, so let's see What would be its answer? 10th question. It was used to kill soldiers who were, yeah, this is the location. It was used to kill soldiers who were running away as battle lines broke up. So soldiers were running away. That means they were fleeing, right? They were running from the battle, not fighting. They were running. And it is thought this is how most of the Lancastrians buried at Toten Hall died. So the reason that many of the Lancastrians died was that they were running from the battle, and during the running they were died. They died. Okay, so Lancastrians were fighting the Yorkists. So definitely they were running away from the Yorkists. So definitely our answer is gonna be A. Yes, because most Lancastrians were killed fleeing the Yorkists. They were running away from the Yorkists, and that is how they died. Nothing is given about, yeah, that is given that they were buried at Toten Hall, but they were not killed at Toten Hall. This is not given. And in prison, no, nothing is given. Fighting in lines on the battlefield, no, they did not die while fighting. They died while running. So definitely A option is the correct option. 11th question. At Toten, it is likely soldiers' bodies were cut up and buried in mass graves. Okay, so soldiers' bodies were cut up and buried. They were like um, brutally buried, you can say, or their means of death was very violent, as we have um, read earlier. So as this was common practice at that time, because King Edward IV was against religion, since Yorkists hated Lancastrians, so opponents of King Edward IV would live in fear. So these are the four options, and I guess from these four options we have to find out the correct appropriate answer. Like their bodies were cut up and buried in mass graves. Hmm. Yes, I think so. It's in this paragraph. It is not known why the death rate in the battle was so high, nor why the bodies of soldiers was so disfigured. So they are saying that the bodies of soldiers were disfigured. That means they were cut, brutally cut. Their bodies were brutally cut. Skeletal evidence indicates that often a dozen blows were given to a man who would have been killed by the initial two or three. So a man who would have killed by like two or three blows, they were given additional blows, like a dozen blows. They were like total savagery was done in the battle. Archaeologists are uncertain when these additional blows were made. They are uncertain, they do not know when these additional blows were made on the battlefield or in the burial process. Like they were the additional extra blows were made during the fighting or in the burial process when they were being buried. But such savagery, such brutality suggests the emergence of a new concept of an opponent. So, due to this, a new concept of an opponent came, and it is that not merely someone to kill. So, the new concept is that opponent is not the person that is just meant to kill, but someone whose identity should be utterly effaced. So, this is the location, because they are saying a new concept of an opponent emerged due to this savagery. They were doing all the brutality in the field to emerge a new concept of an opponent, and that new concept was that an opponent meant a person who is not only to be killed, but his identity, his or her identity is utterly effaced. It means completely removed from the world, like completely destroyed. So in a manner, they are saying that an opponent, whosoever will be the opponent, definitely the opponent they are talking about of opponent of king, what was the name of the king, I forgot. It was King Edward IV. So the opponent of King Edward IV, whosoever will be the opponent of King Edward IV, should not only be killed, but his identity would be utterly effaced, completely removed, destroyed. Nobody could be able to recognize him or her. So definitely they're spreading fear. Like nobody should be the opponent of King Edward IV. It would be like a brutal stage when anyone would be become an opponent of King Edward IV. So as this was common practice, no, this was not a common practice because this is not given. King Edward IV was against religion, no, this is also not given. Since Yorkists hated Lancastrians, no, this is again not given. So opponents of King Edward IV would live in fear. Definitely this is gonna be the appropriate answer. Yes, because soldiers were brutally cut, their bodies were like in a violent way, they were buried because the King Edward IV wanted that whosoever would oppose him should definitely live in fear. Like they should think before opposing king. So definitely he wanted to spread fear. Soldiers who died in a Swedish battle in 1361 were also killed with pole axes, went to heaven, were buried in individual graves, were buried more respectfully. Let's see what are they talking about, the soldiers who died in Swedish battle in 1361. It is easy to forget that in medieval England burial was sacred and people believed ascent to heaven only took place when the body of the dead was whole. So people believed that a person only went to heaven when his dead body was whole, like it was complete, without any cuts or without the absence of any bones. So the body should be whole and then only the person would go to heaven. In all Europe, there is only one other known mass grave on the scale of Toten. So from the around same time, and that is Sweden from 1361. So the mass grave that was at the during the Battle of Toten happened uh, like again in Sweden from 1361, which was actually before the Battle of Toten. So it was like around the same time. Both of these wars included mass graves on same scales there. So there they are talking about Sweden in 1361. However, so like they are using on the other hand, soldiers from the Battle of Visby were buried whole in their armor. So definitely this is the location, because they are saying that during the battle of Visby, soldiers were buried whole. Like there were no brutal cuts on the bodies of the soldiers, like they were on the bodies of soldiers of the Battle of Toten. So definitely they were buried whole in their armor without any cut or without any removal of the bone. Their bodies were complete. So definitely they are talking about this. So let's now explore the options. What would be the answer on the basis of this? It is not told that soldiers uh, in the Swedish battle were killed with poleaxes. This is not given. And they went to heaven. This is certainly not given. Were buried in individual graves. This is also not given. Were buried more respectfully. Yeah, this we can say because they were buried with their body as a whole. While the soldiers who participated in the Battle of Toten, they were buried with brutal cuts on their bodies. So definitely the soldiers who participated in the Swedish battle in 1361 were buried more respectfully with their body as a whole and even with their armor. Okay. So now comes the last question of the passage, and it is what would be a suitable title for the passage? Okay, Toten, a forgotten battle in English history, the horrors of warfare in an age before guns, modern savagery in medieval Toten, Toten a turning point in military techniques. So let's see. Usually when this type of question comes, the answer is in the last paragraph on the or in the last two, three lines. So let's just explore those lines, what's written. So they are saying that it seems that organized brutality is no recent phenomena. It existed 550 years ago. So they are saying that the brutality is no recent phenomena, which means they are trying to say that brutality that is at present, it was not recently evolved. It does not came into existence recently. It existed 550 years ago. That means the brutality that is at present came into existence 550 years ago. That means they are talking about the brutality, the savagery, and they are talking about the present brutality existed 550 years ago. That means present brutality, modern brutality existed 550 years ago. So let's see which option best suits the title of the reading passage. Toten, a forgettable battle in English history? No. The horrors of warfare in an age before guns? No. Modern savagery in medieval Towton? Yes, this can be. Toten, a turning point in military techniques. No turning point is given about military techniques. So definitely the answer is gonna be C. Because they are talking about modern savagery. That means present brutality. The brutality that is at present existed 550 years ago. And from the word medieval, we can come to know about the past, right? Like in the past years, there was the same kind of savagery that is done today. So modern savagery existed in medieval Toten. So definitely this is the answer of the last question. Hope that you would have understand all the questions, like from where the locations came, how did the answers came. If any doubt, you can ask me in the comment section. So with this, today's video ends. Thank you everyone.